Got an oil drip, and apparently my JB weld is not working. Because it's wet. How could it leak through JB weld? I don't get it. Hey guys, how you doing? It's Henry. Emotion Blows. Welcome to another episode. Welcome to episode 7 of my Z-Master Kohler 26.5 EFI ECV 749 engine. As you know from previous episodes, I've replaced the camshaft, connecting rod, piston, and rings. JB welded a sump cover on a couple of hairline cracks. And I've been troubleshooting this starter because when we tried to crank this a couple of days ago, it wouldn't crank. The motor does spin, but the Bendix gear doesn't pop up to make contact with the teeth of the flywheel, and therefore it won't crank. Well, my mistake was that I simply connected power to the starter motor, not really thinking about the solenoid. I did some research on this starter. This starter is called a shift starter, meaning that the solenoid works in conjunction with the starter in a very, very critical way. The solenoid actually has a push pin that goes upwards when engaged, and it pushes a plastic lever that pushes the Bendix gear up. So my mistake was not energizing the solenoid to test it. I was merely testing if the starter spun, and it did. However, you have to put 12 volts to the trigger tab to energize the solenoid so that it pushes up that lever that pushes up the Bendix gear. If I take the power wire and at the same time touch the tab on the solenoid and I put power to it, look right here, make sure that you could see the Bendix gear pop up. As you can see, it popped up. So, there's nothing wrong with the starter at all. I just needed to energize the solenoid at the same time, which I didn't do. So I'm going to put this starter back on again. In addition, when I bled the hydraulic lifters last time, I did it right side up. I need to do it upside down so that when you compress the lifters, oil seeps out the bottom. When I had it right side up, there wasn't enough oil to come out of the top. So I think maybe the lifters still have oil in it. Therefore, it was keeping the valves open when I tightened up the rocker arms. There's a lot of science involved in this engine and stuff that I'm learning. Also, I saw a few drips when I came out this morning. All right, so one side of the cylinder head, I redid the bleeding of the hydraulic lifters on one side, and the play is supposed to be like when you push in the lifter, it's supposed to go in like that much. Sometimes if you have too much oil in it, it'll only go in a little bit, and therefore will compress the springs really tight, and then you might bend a rod. You have to have at least half an inch of play that goes in. So they were fine. The other side though, one of them, you could only go in a little bit. And so I compressed that one quite a bit. It took like 5 to 8 minutes, and slowly oil was trickling out. So now they both compress at like a half an inch like that. So that's what you need. So I feel pretty confident that the hydraulic lifters are bled correctly. And then I just reattached the starter. And we remember we do have oil in here. So my purpose was to try to get this to crank so that it splashes the oil around and makes it crank better and easier. Because right now there's a lot of resistance when I try to turn the crank manually. So I've got it hooked up now. Negative to negative, positive to the positive of the solenoid. All right. And then I have the other jumper pack that is grounded to the negative part of the battery, and the other part to the trigger tab of the solenoid. That sends 12 volts from somewhere else to trigger the solenoid, to engage it, to make the solenoid pop up, to push the lever like that, to push the Bendix gear upwards, and at the same time supply 12 volts to the starter to turn. So, after 3 episodes of just the engine, will this now crank? Here we go, because I'm afraid it won't even crank because it's so tight.
That's what she said.
Here we go. Oh man, should I hold this? Well, it's not gonna start, you know, but ready? Yeah, so it cranks okay. Fast? Not really, but it cranks pretty strong too. That's pretty good, I think. Now, after all that splashing around, will any oil come out of the sump gasket that I made? Or could I actually afford to loosen the sump bolts a little? Because remember, when you use RTV silicone as the gasket, it flexes and compresses to almost nothing. Whereas if you had a paper gasket, right, you can't really compress that more than that. So I think a paper gasket would give it that extra 0.003 of an inch to alleviate some of the pressure on the camshaft. So that would be probably the best way to go. But right now, my sump cover seems to be leaking again. So I may need to get another sump cover. Oh my God. But how about it, guys? It cranks! All right, so that came off. Again, we'll put this back on the trigger again. I'm stoked that it cranks, guys. Really. That's a win for me. I'll hold it. Yeah, so it takes a lot to crank it, as you can tell. And the battery is fully charged. In the beginning, it was really, decently fast. So that's good. Yeah, I mean, I'm pretty happy with that. I might have to reinforce the JB weld on that sump cover and see how much it costs for a new sump cover, But I think after I address the sump cover leak, I guess it's okay to mount this engine onto the Z Master. Maybe. So while I thought I fixed the muffler by welding the crack spot, actually the heat shield is supposedly attached to it and it just came off. See? Cracked off of there. The heat shield is actually connected to the muffler, touching it. So I have to whip out my welder and do a couple of tack welds so that this thing doesn't flop around like this. This couldn't possibly be held on by just this side of it. So I'm gonna do some welding, just get the heat shield solid on there. Okay, bled the hydraulic lifters, pretty confident that they were bled correctly. Welded the heat shield again, now it's adhered onto the bracket. I switched this back around again. I found out that this bottom one is the source. This goes to the fuel filter to the gas tank. Middle one is the pulse that goes inside to the crankcase. This one feeds the fuel injection, which I don't know how it works, but they all go into the electronic fuel pump and then feeds whatever's in there. I don't understand it. But we now know it cranks. I'm gonna let it sit for another day. I put a piece of brand new cardboard right underneath where the leak is, and it's touching. So I'll let it sit for a day, pull it back up, find out exactly where that leak is coming from, try to JB weld it some more, then test it for another day, see if it leaks. We cannot mount this if it's gonna leak, you know what I mean? And then in the meantime, I'll price out what a sump cover costs for this and maybe a gasket. And then we'll be ready to mount this. A lot of work. 3 episodes just getting this engine fixed, you know? And so far it's cost me $85. Not bad, right? $85 to see if this works. I think it's worth it because it's a $3,300 engine, brand new. Surely it's not brand new, but it didn't have that much hours on it. Maybe, what was it, 1,500 or something? People say that for commercial engines, that's nothing. We'll continue this when we find out where the sump is leaking from. Good morning. Let's check that oil leak on that sump. So there's a little hairline crack there. And a hairline crack there. I'm gonna spray this with brake cleaner, wipe it down, and then go over it again with another coat. Here's another super thick coat, probably 1/4 inch thick. Let this cure for a day. We'll come back and see if it leaks. It's been 24 hours since I JB welded it. That's a big blob, smooth. If there was a crack, you'd be able to see it. So I think it's cured enough to put it horizontally, let the oil in the pan saturate the area, see if it leaks out again. Got another piece of clean cardboard. Let's put this here for another day, see if any leaks appear on the cardboard. Good morning, it's the next day. I'm gonna lift up this engine and I have a clean piece of cardboard there. Let's see if the second coat of JB Weld sealed the leak. If we don't have any leaks, I'm gonna try to put this into the Z-Master today. Wow, what progress. Okay, here we go. I'm gonna lift it up. I'm gonna. Hey! Cleanage. No Earl. So looks like the leak is fixed. Good enough for me to install this engine. Oh, my back is still killing me though. So I put everything, connected everything, but I could not find for the life of me where the oxygen sensor goes into. So then I was looking everywhere on the wiring harness, just couldn't find anything that attached to. And I know that it's gotta be around here because this attaches like that, you know what I mean? So it's gotta be like around here. So finally I said, did I put the top engine cover over it? And sure enough, I removed this panel, which is good because there's these two little panels where you can open up and you can find, and you can see stuff, you know? And it was in there. How am I gonna get this back out of there? So I'm to have dismantle some of this stuff and try to squeeze that out. Pulled the cover out as much as I could. This is plastic, so it was stretched. Got the harness out, connected it to this. So now this is connected to the oxygen sensor. Okay, all the connections seems to be correct. Throttle's a little iffy, but I'm all right. It's pretty complicated. So now I'm gonna put the 4 engine mounting bolts up from the bottom, drive pulley, and then the electric PTO. All right, so you guys saw I did put the 4 engine mounting bolts in there, as you see. However, I couldn't get this pulley on. Why? Because when I was rebuilding the engine, I was using channel locks to turn this shaft a lot to test the smoothness of it spinning. And because of that, I have marred the surfaces of that, and so it's like jagged and stuff with metal, and the pulley won't go back on there. So I have to like sand that down or grind it down or just smooth enough the shaft so that I could get that drive pulley on. But I think I'm gonna try to start it without the pulleys on there. Okay, fellas, it's all connected. Got oil in there, 2 quarts. I'm just gonna crank it and see for what happens. Oh, it won't crank unless it's sitting on it. I just opened the fuel shut off. I think I heard like a fuel pump working. All right, I've got 4 triangles in the thing. I guess you don't choke it. You put mid throttle and crank it. Ooh, it wanted to. Wow. pops weren't good. So it was promising for a second until it went bang. And then things didn't sound good coming out of the muffler. Wouldn't you agree? And I don't know what it is, but I used up all the juice in the battery. So I don't like that sound that came out of it, that pop. And then the smoke came out of the air cleaner. And then it sounded different when I cranked it after that. I have a feeling I blew something, such as the rods, the push rods, so that the valves aren't opening now. So I'm charging the battery some more so I can test it some more, but I didn't like that pop. I'm sure you guys would agree that it sounded different after it popped. That sound afterwards sounds like what was going on with my other tractor, the DLT 2000. Push rods are bent and the valves aren't opening when they're supposed to. That's what it sounds like. Why would that happen though? I thought for a second it was gonna run really well. it did run for like a second or two, right? Before it went pop. So I'm gonna charge the battery up overnight, give it another try after that, before I take the valve covers off and see about the push rods. A lot of stuff happened before we reached to this point. And yes, if the engine ran, I would have smoothed out the crankshaft so I can get the drive pulley on there, then put the electric PTO on there, and then connect it, and then of course see if it drives and runs and all that stuff, and the pumps work. I don't even know. But the main thing was to get the engine running. Now remember, I did spend about 80 bucks in parts, connecting rod, piston, and rings, also a new camshaft. That's all the money that I have into it. I felt like it was worth it to try to get this EFI engine running, because if it did, this engine would be worth a lot of money. And if I didn't, I could just part out this engine and make a few $100, because the EFI engines have a lot of parts here that are very expensive. But if this engine didn't run, I would take my 22 horsepower V-twin engine on another red tractor I have in the backyard. Now that engine runs great. Problem is, it's not an EFI engine, meaning I would have to bypass the entire wiring harness for this system, because the system is meant for an EFI engine. Harnesses and ECUs and high pressure fuel stuff and all kinds of safety switch stuff that goes to that. I would have to just manually wire it so that it turns and shuts off with 4 wires: ground, battery, solenoid, and those are the only 4 things you need for a regular engine to run and shut off, which is really easy. But then all the features of it, you wouldn't be able to use any of that, because all you really need is an engine that's turning the pulleys to turn the belts to drive the pumps to make it move. That's all it is. I could do that, but first I want to exhaust all means on this EFI. I'm going to try everything I can with your help. Maybe you guys could put some input in the comment section so I can read it and know what do I have to do here, you know? The good thing is there's no leaks. There's no oil at all on the ground, so nothing's blown that bad. It's taken a lot to get to this point. I'm as anxious as you are to get this going. But I wanted to exhaust everything before I move to another engine. You guys want to see more about this? Remember to subscribe. Did you know that 73% of you guys are not subscribed? How is that possible? Stay tuned for episode 8 on the Z-Master Kohler EFI project. See you guys next time on Mowers and Blowers.
I'll see you guys next time on Mowers and Blowers.